Welcome students, how are you? How the weekend? Welcome back to the lesson 4 of your grade 12 geography. Students, what do you learn in your last period of grade 12 geography lesson? To revise our previous lesson, these were the topics. In the last period, we have discussed the population theories and a group of peoples who develop a different population theory. Another thing is trends of population growth in Ethiopia and the amount of growth that Ethiopian population records. Finally, we have discussed on the population distribution, and as we know that the population distribution is uneven throughout the world. Students, let's come to the today's lesson of settlement patterns of Ethiopia population. Students, what is settlement? In Ethiopia, different settlement types have been developed due to physical and human-made factors. Based on these factors, we can list some of the physical and the human-made factor. For example, if you take relief is the first major important factor which affects the distribution of population throughout Ethiopia. From this relief type, altitude is the major factor. As you know, the Ethiopian landform is ups and downs. When we see this ups and down nature of slope, most of the Ethiopian peoples live on the highland parts of the country, and very few peoples are settled on the lowland parts of the country. Therefore, altitude is the major factor which affects population settlements. The second factor is climate. From the climate, rainfall and the temperature is the major factor. From these factors, temperature is very important one, because all peoples need a suitable temperature in order to settle on some places. In Ethiopian context, highland part has a dense population settlement. This is due to the moderate type of temperature in the highland parts. And reverse, the lowland parts of Ethiopia have high amounts of temperature. Due to this reason, the population settlement is sparse. Another important thing is rainfall. As you know, our countries depend on agricultural economic activity. For this economic activity, rainfall is very important. Therefore, in areas of high rainfall region, the population settlement is high. Another important thing is the kinds of land ownership. This one, land ownership needs their own lands. Most of the peoples of Ethiopia own their own land and they want to settle on their own lands. In this context, in the place where land is taken as own property, population needs to still settle on that lands. Another important thing is the level of development. From the level of development, transportation and industrialization is very important. In this context, transportation access is very important, especially in the urban regions. If there is access of transportation, the settlement of population may increase. Another one is industrialization. In case of industrialization, if one settlement have high amount of industrial development, people want to settle on that industrial regions. Another one is the need for community defense. As you know, most of the African peoples were under the colony of different countries of Europe. At that time, peoples of the country need to defend themselves from the enemies. In order to this, they need to be on the highland parts of the country. This is in order to protect themselves from their enemies. Therefore, in the very suitable areas where there is a suitable defense site, the peoples may be settled and dense. Finally, there is a need for communal field of labor. If there is an area or a field which need a labor force, peoples want to stay on that area. Therefore, settlement may be developed on that regions. Students, based on these factors, we can categorize the Ethiopian population settlement into two categories. These categories depend on the 1. Dominant economic activities, 2. depend on the degree of population densities. By taking into consideration these two bases, we can say that the Ethiopian population settlement type is a rural and urban population settlement type. But what is their basic difference? The difference between these two can be listed as the following. If it is an urban settlement, they are usually branded by a non-agricultural economic activity, while the rural settlement type is known by agricultural or typically by agricultural economic activity. This is in case of economic type. Rural settlements are in Ethiopia, they can be broadly categorized into different parts again. From this one, the permanent and the temporary or mobile settlement is the two types of rural settlements. What makes them different? For example, we say one rural settlement is permanent. But when the peoples stay at a given place for at least 10 years and above. Therefore, most of the rural settlements over the highland parts of Ethiopia are called permanent rural settlements. The permanent rural settlements of Ethiopia are mostly associated with the crop farming highlands of the country. This means, as you know, highland part of the Ethiopia is known by a suitable climate. Therefore, the highlanders are practice the farming economic activity. This economic activity enforces the people to stay at one place at least for a given years, at minimum 10 years and more. The permanent rural settlements of Ethiopia are also classified into another categories. The rural settlements are called the scattered and the grouped rural settlements. Students, these categories depend on the second factor of settlements categorization. What I mean is the reason for these categories, population densities. For example, if it is scattered, the populations are settled in the diffused mode, or they settled at very far apart. Typically, in Ethiopia, scattered or diffused settlement is found in the rural parts of the country, where on the very broad areas, very few peoples are located. On the second one, that's a grouped settlement, what we call it nucleated settlement. In this one, you can find large number of peoples locating on a given kilometer square as far as the density concerns. The difference between these two is, in the areas of scattered settlements, homesteads are separated by relatively long distances. But in the grouped one, they are categorized by a large number of homestead or households on the given areas. Dark colored students. Let's come to another point. As you know, in Ethiopia, the Derg regime's compulsory villagization resulted in the formation of the rural settlements or the grouped settlements or villages in many parts of the country. But in most parts of the northern region, such settlements are remained in a place for years with the idea that they would enhance communal ownership of and the provision of social services. That means there were a problem of provision of social service and communal ownership of land. These were the main problem of the Derg regime. So what it causes? At the Derg regime, the peoples are enforced to be on another land in order to settle on another new villages, which make the peoples not happy to be settled over there. Therefore, the peoples began to return to their original places. Even in a manner of reversal move, this movement began even before the regime was overthrown. That means at the time of Derg regime. But the current government of Ethiopia has recently conducted villagization programs that are based on the people's will to live on their original settlement area. So this one is better when we compare with the Derg regime because the people's interest is considered here. Every peoples are settled on a given areas based on their willingness. Students, let's come to another topic, the temporary settlement. This is the second settlement type. We have been discussed about the permanent one. Here is the temporary settlements of rural settlement in Ethiopia. When we talk about temporary, we mean that population changes their home places from time to time. Typically, this is the nature of the pastoralist region of the Ethiopia, or on the peripheral parts of the country, we can see these kinds of settlements, a temporary settlement. But what kind of settlements are called temporary? The lowlands in the most part of the Rift Valley and the peripheral areas of Ethiopia are characterized by this temporary settlement. But what makes them to live in the temporary settlement? There needs a reason. The settlement in these areas are temporary because the pastoralists have to look for their new sites for water and pasture lands for their livestock. When the resources are exhausted at each new site, they change their homes. In short, in the temporary settlement type, people change their home from time to time. As far as their cattle or their livestock change their areas, the peoples are also change their homes. The major problem posed by this mobile or temporary settlement in this pastoralist area in Ethiopia is difficulty in providing the peoples with social services. That means they are changing their home due to the shortage of these social services. Another one is shortage of clean water. They move in order to seek the water for their own and for their livestock. And for the sake of schools, shortage of school. For the shortage of hospitals and electricities and others. This is the major problem of Ethiopian rural temporary settlement still now. Because the most of these services cannot move from one place to another, as do the pastoralists. The only way that the pastoralists could receive and benefit from this is by settling in the permanent locations. But due to their changing of home places, they have a problem of this one. What we call it school, hospital, electricity, and clean water shortage. But what about the urban settlements? What type of places known as urban in Ethiopian context and in the world context? What are the criteria to say urban? Students, urban settlement includes residences in the cities and towns. But urbanization is another thing. Urbanization is the process of development of urban settlements. We have to identify these two important terms. Urban is a settlement. Urbanization is a process. It is the process of development of urban settlements in the way that small cities and the towns are grown to large cities and large urban areas. We call it urbanization. Students, as you know, in most parts of Africa, urbanization is a recent phenomenon. And it's attributed to colonialism. That means the beginning of urbanization in Africa is related with the coming of colonizers. Urbanization in Ethiopia is also similar with this one. But it's not influenced by European colonialism. It is unplanned natural phenomena of the late 19th century and the early 20th centuries. Students, not all group settlements are classified as urban centers. Different countries have their own criteria in order to call places, cities or towns as an urban area. The major criteria in Ethiopia is quite different from the world urban criteria. For example, in the world criteria, one place has to be settled with more than 10 to 100,000 to be said urban. But in Ethiopia, settlement has a minimum of 2,000 people in order to say urban. Second, 2/3 of the population in the settlement have to engage in the non-agricultural economic activity. And the third one is, one place has to be chartered, or it need to have a chartered municipality which registered information about a given population of that country. So this is the major criteria of Ethiopian population settlements. Students, historically, two major factors contributed to the development of urban centers. What are these two important factors or historical events? The first one is the interconnection of different parts of the country with all-weather roads, which radiate from Addis Ababa to all regions. As you know, if this place is Addis Ababa, all roads radiate from Addis Ababa to different regional areas. In this context, the central parts of Ethiopia must be growing to the urban region. This is one, by the movement of peoples from region to the central parts of the country. Therefore, the first reason is the road system, which radiates from Addis Ababa to different regions. The second reason is, or the second factor is, the 5-year Italian occupation in Ethiopia. This shows the role of Italians in the development of urban in Ethiopia, which intensify the construction of roads and development of small-scale industries and service-giving institutions in the country. Students, you have to know these two factors, and all the Ethiopian urban areas have similar kinds of reasons with this one. Based on this one, two main areas in the country have relatively large concentration of urban population. That means there are areas which have high number of urban population and small number of urban populations, or large urban settlers and small urban settlers. From these two main areas, show I the first one and Hararghe the second one. These two areas have high number of urban population. Together with these regions, or these two regions, accounts more than 50% of the country's urban population. In short, these two regions are the most urbanized parts of the country. What are the major reasons for these two urban areas? Why Showa and Hararge are taken as the largest urban centers? One, relatively high concentration of industries are found on the regions. As you know, most of the industry in Ethiopia is concentrated in Addis Ababa and in the Hararge regions. Recently, in Diredhawa. Second one is there is a greater assemblage of social services, especially in the recent time. There is a greater service is given in the urban regions of Addis Ababa or in the Showa regions, such as schools. And the very important thing is health institutions. Relatively, health institutions are better in the Showa region than the all regions of Ethiopia. Another one is water supplies, electricity and transportation. Reasons. Therefore, if these things are fulfilled, people's need for such facilities and move to the central parts of the country. That's why there is an opportunity of these services on the region of Showa. That's why we call it Addis Ababa or Showa and Hararge are the most urbanized region in Ethiopian context. Students, as we come to another topic. This is very important topic. But let me give you one question. Can you level the Ethiopian regions according to their number of populations which live in the urban, with the exception of Hararge and Showa? Try to find this one. Students, this is another topic. This topic shows the dynamics of population change. What we call it, determinants of population change. Students, how populations are changed? What makes the population to be changed? Change can be seen from 3 different angles. Change can be positive, change can be negative, and change can be constant or unchanged. Based on this one, what factors can change population? Here, there are 3 important determinants of population changes. The first one is fertility. The second one is mortality. And the third one is migration. Students, what do you know about these 3 important determinants of population change? What is the role of these 3 important pointers in the change of population? As you know, fertility means, in short, birth. And the role of fertility in the change of population is positive. And the role of mortality is negative. The role of migration is both negative and positive. Students, let's see one by one the effect of these dynamics and their role in Ethiopian population changes. What they looks like in Ethiopian context. For example, if you change, or if you want to see the change between these two factors, the change between fertility and mortality, we can find the natural increase. In formula, natural increase equals to birth rate minus death rate. The change of, or the result of this, can be positive or negative. If the amount of births is greater than the amount of deaths, the result will be positive. But if the result of death rate is greater than the result of birth rate, the change of population is going to be negative. If you want to see the change on the net migration, you can see two important terms. Immigration, letter I, incoming population, and letter E, immigration, the outgoing population. If you subtract letter I from letter E, you will get net migration rate. But if you want to see the change of one country's population, you need to have information about the net migration rate and the net natural increase, or the amount of natural increase. By a formula, in order to see the amount of population growth rate, growth rate is equals to birth rate minus death rate plus or minus net migration rate. Students, in our next session, we will see how to calculate this population growth rate. Our mission is to know how population is changed. The final result of this formula gives us growth rate. Then you can check whether one country's population is increasing, decreasing, or constantly moving. That is what we call it change. Students, I hope you get good points on today's lesson, and this is enough for today. I will see you in the next session. Thank you for today's. Stay at home. Bye.